Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, I wanted to start this week out by saying to my friends in the NBA media ecosystem, welcome. Welcome to the grind set. Welcome to having to podcast on weekends. Welcome to waking up Sunday morning thinking critically about making content. I'm referring, of course, to the fact that the most insane trade of my lifetime and perhaps the history of the NBA happened last night, and that was Luka Doncic, 25-year-old Luka Doncic, traded to the Lakers for Anthony Davis and a first-round pick and a couple other things. We don't need to get into the details of that here on Tipping Pitches because you don't know any of the other players involved, I would venture to guess. You in on Jalen Hood-Schifino? You know about that guy? Big Hood-Schifino head?
Yeah, well, he is really great at spreading the floor.
Good try. Yeah, 3-and-D. Just say a bunch of basketball buzzwords.
Right. What I really like most is his ball movement.
Questionable. No, I don't know. I don't think that one lands.
Okay. All right.
Just welcome to the grind is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
The NBA media folks have had it too easy for too long. You know, they're just grifting off of trades and likes and retweets. And that's all they care about. They don't have to sit down and do hard analysis like we do here in the baseball podcasting world, in the independent media space here on the Tipping Pitches podcast, where Sunday morning, it's content time. Come rain or come shine.
Yep.
If it's 10 degrees in New York, you're still walking your butt over here to record this damn podcast about Major League Baseball, the collective bargaining agreement, the net present value of Shohei Ohtani's deal, the future value, the team control provided by Juan Soto to his many various teams over the years.
Yeah, sorry we work. Sorry we get up and work and labor every day.
I'm just
Put
saying.
value into the economy.
Now they get a little taste of what it's like to be an independent baseball podcaster. No, I'm just kidding. That sucks that the biggest trade in NBA history broke on a Saturday night at midnight. The reason that I'm actually starting with this is because, you know, we put out a call for mailbag questions. We're going to do those in the second half of this podcast, but I thought it would be a nice way to start this pod by answering one of those mailbag questions we got based on the breaking news. This question comes from Morgan. Morgan said, I've seen baseball fans asking basketball fans to explain the Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic trade in MLB terms. What would be the equivalent baffling trade event for baseball? And has a comparable trade ever actually happened in our sport? You're just hearing about who Anthony Davis is for the first time. Would you like to answer this question? I wrote down a couple.
Yeah. Well, which part of the question do you want to answer first? Do you want to talk about whether this has really happened before? Because
it's hard to say because one player can't have as much of an impact in baseball. Obviously, this is something that we've talked about a myriad of times over the years. So it's less likely in baseball that a player would ever get to be perceived as untouchable as Luka Doncic or someone like LeBron James. Now, in the NBA, there's a whole history of trades of guys who were considered or who should have been considered untouchable. Like the Sixers never should have traded Charles Barkley. The many teams that traded Wilt Chamberlain probably shouldn't have traded him and didn't get the commensurate value back for him. But in baseball, it's just like less likely that a guy would ever get to that point where he's providing so much value to a franchise. And as we might talk a little bit about later, NBA is a salary capped league. And so these players are only making a set amount of money. And so the contracts swap a lot easier than they do in baseball. So it's hard to say whether something like this has actually happened in baseball. I did think of some fun hypotheticals though.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess the one that I would say actually is A-Rod to the Yankees.
Yeah.
I mean, from a Texas team to a big market team, but it was less about swapping player for player and more about the Rangers just for salary dumping him at that point.
I know. That is actually one of the ones that I came up with as well, right? Because he gets swapped for Alfonso Soriano. Now, it's a little bit different because like they were the same age when that trade happens. But obviously A-Rod's star is so much bigger then Soriano's at that
That's
point.
a really
He's
good
still a
one,
very
actually,
good
though,
player.
because Soriano was like a 40-40 guy.
Right,
Soriano's
yeah.
a great player. That's a great call. Do you want to hear my hypothetical ones for like if this happened today?
Yeah, let's do it. I wrote down a couple too.
Luka Doncic is Juan Soto.
Okay.
Both in that he is incredible. He's beloved by analytics, dorks, and ball watchers just the same. He's got a little bit of like a fuck you attitude in him somewhere underneath that. Luka's fun and he can laugh and have fun on the court and whatnot, but he's like very much like Eastern European, like I'm gonna punch you in the mouth if you piss me off. And Soto is obviously that we've come to love the cocky Soto shuffle and the trash talking and the smiling at the pitchers when they just miss and that sort of thing. But also just in the fact that Soto came up so young and Luka came over here at 19. So they've been in our lives for so long, and yet Luka's still 25, turning 26 in February. Soto, I believe, is 26, right?
That sounds right.
And also both of them are not very good at defense. But are so incredibly efficient at offense.
Right.
So I really do think, I feel strongly that Luka is basically Juan Soto. That's the one-to-one comparison right now. Trading him for Anthony Davis, I came up with a short list of players, 2 position players, 2 pitchers. The first guy I thought of was Mookie Betts. This would be like if you traded Juan Soto straight up for Mookie Betts.
Yeah.
He's older. He's still really great. He's been around the block. He's won a title, and he didn't start his career on the team that he's on, but he has since ingratiated and become beloved by the fan base that he's a part of, Obviously, you'd kind of rather have the younger, better player, but kind of neither side of that comes out that happy.
Yeah.
So Mookie was one that I thought of.
I think it's interesting because both of those guys, Soto and Betts, were involved in their own trades that have some analogs to the Luka trade.
Yeah.
But again, because baseball's structure is so different and teams value youth and team control, right? It's like those guys are traded for a handful of prospects.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to, like
the Mookie trade is like the Luka trade without AD in it.
Right. Yes, exactly.
It's so crazy that happened. In a similar vein, I do think that'd be sort of like if you traded Juan Soto for Bryce Harper. You're getting a play, but it's not quite as good as I think for Mookie, because you're getting a player in Mookie that's like a great all-around player like Anthony Davis is, providing value offensively and defensively. Mookie obviously plays all around the diamond. Bryce is basically like a glorified DH first baseman now, which is like the same thing that Soto is. He's just a little bit older, so that's kind of the one-to-one comparison there. I did try to massage it to see if it would be sort of like, if it would feel a little bit better to trade Soto for a pitcher, because again, Anthony Davis, like his primary value again is that he's a really good offensive player, but his primary value comes from the defense.
Radically different skill set.
Yes. And so I floated it in my head of like Soto for Wheeler.
Yeah.
Like someone who's slightly older, but still is really like the best at what he does, which is like 80 rim protection and being able to move and stay in front of the ball. And also offensively, he can be really hot from time to time too. But it's really kind of like Wheeler and Garrett Cole are the only starting pitchers left who are like 5 years older than Soto and on really big contracts and still really valuable to their team. And that it would be shocking because every other starting pitcher in baseball, like you could see a good, slightly older starting pitcher being traded for someone as good as Juan Soto. There's nobody that you would say no to trade for Juan Soto.
Right.
And yet the Yankees just got him for fucking Michael King. Because the Padres were salary dumping. Like, we have such a dumb sport. How about you? Any other ones?
I think those are good. Initially, I thought of someone like Vlad Jr. As the Luka comp. Again, there's the clear raw skill that he's displayed. The youth, I think they're similar ages. Vlad is 25. There are the questions around conditioning as well, right?
He did come up, but I just think he's not good enough.
I kind of agree.
Luka's like the 3rd best player in the NBA.
Yes, I know.
If
you are doing this 2 years ago, maybe you can make the argument for Vlad, but I feel like we have not seen the growth in the last couple of years. Anyway, this isn't a Vlad podcast, but he was one of the first people who came to mind.
Yeah.
But I started thinking about someone like Bobby Witt Jr. Who is like very clearly impacts the game on both sides of the ball. is a young star who is only going to get better. And what if you trade him for someone like Nolan Arenado? Or like
that would be a disaster.
Correct. Isn't that what we're going for here? Or Freddie Freeman.
Freeman's better though, because Arenado
better.
is kind of washed. Like, we're worried that he's like not even a good player anymore. AD is good.
All right. I mean, okay, sure. I don't have a sense of how good Anthony Davis is commensurate to the rest of the league. The reason I pick Arenado is, again, such a defensive superstar over the years, is still a good player. I mean, still put up like I think a 3-WAR season last year. Is obviously
people are burying him though. People are like, he's done.
I know. They're like, he's Anthony Rendon. But Freeman is the one that maybe makes a little bit more sense of like a guy who is who's still kind of in, coming out of his prime.
Yeah.
Still has plenty to contribute, but is on a big contract, is aging, and doesn't necessarily play the most impactful position on the field. I like the Wheeler comp too. I didn't think too much about pitchers just because I think it's so hard to evaluate value. Like
I know
it's like compare equivalent value.
Right, exactly. Although we have WAR, which in theory is supposed to be scaled to no matter what position you are.
Yes.
It's tricky for a lot of reasons. And I'm also not trying to understate how tricky it is because like conditioning doesn't really matter in baseball. I guess it would be more like injury concerns would be the thing that you would have to weigh.
Yeah.
Which is something that Luka has dealt with also, but most people think that's because of his conditioning concerns. Mm-hmm. But in baseball, it's like you don't really need to be in. Your weight doesn't really matter, I don't think, quite as much.
Right. And maybe Mike Trout, like 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Although Mike Trout is almost too good,
Yeah.
Like Luka could be that, I guess. But Mike Trout was already that. I think Mike Trout the comp would have been more like trading LeBron on his first contract.
Yeah.
It's a crazy trade.
It's wild.
It's really it had my wheels turning when I was thinking about trying to make a comp. Because the guy that you're trading the Soto type or the Luka equivalent for has to be like beloved on his team and really important to his team, but also not totally untouchable. Like I would say the Lakers would have entertained offers for Anthony Davis, regardless of whether it was for Luka Doncic or not. Mm-hmm. Just in the interest of kind of sort of resetting their franchise once LeBron retires. LeBron is 40.
Yeah.
You aware of that? He's 40. He's 40 years old.
Sure.
He just turned 40 in December. Watched him last night. Could have been 29. Mm-hmm. He's amazing.
Yeah,
I don't understand it. He had like 33, 12, and 11 last night against the Knicks in the Garden.
Sure. Why not?
What an amazing player. What a pleasure it's been to watch his career since I was in, 5th grade? I don't even know. 2003? 5th grade? No. Probably like 2nd grade. Jesus Christ. Time is a flat circle.
And this is a basketball podcast.
Didn't you? No, you banned us talking about the NFL.
Yeah.
On last year's episode. Would you like to lift that ban to weigh in on the Super Bowl? Big Pat Mahomes. He's back, baby.
No, we're on the main feed. You are breaking the rule right now.
All right, fine. I'll go back and I'll bleep all of that so that I don't have to pay some kind of fine to the league office or whatever. I didn't know that we were podcasting under such strict rules. We really are slipping into authoritarianism.
Oh, wow. So all of a sudden you don't respect norms. Why even make them then? Why even do the bit?
What you're saying is bring decorum back to the Tipping Pitches podcast? All right, fine. Okay, we have an interesting podcast on the slate today. We're certainly not going to help our case in the minds of all the people who think that we are too pro Dodgers, that's for sure. We're going to do something that we're calling Dodgers myth busting. All the things that you see people saying, all of the stuff that you hear often that are arguments about why the Dodgers are ruining baseball, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into some of those things and talk about whether or not the Dodgers actually do have an unfair advantage, whether or not some of these things are valid, and maybe what you can say to people if you find yourself in arguments with people saying that XYZ action by the Dodgers is ruining the sport. And then, like I said, we're going to do some mailbag to close out the podcast. But before we do that, I am Bobby Wagner.
I am Alex Paisley.
And you are listening to Tipping Pitches. Unfortunately, maybe the most pro Dodgers podcast in the entire universe. My reactionary Dodgers hate pivot is going to feed families.
Mm-hmm.
Our families. It's going to feed us. It's going to drive Patreon subscriptions. Going through, writing all of the different addresses on the holiday cards, which are at this point in the hands of the United States Postal Service and God.
And God.
Those are the two people that can make sure that you receive that envelope.
And maybe Elon Musk.
Also, Jesus Christ. Also, keep him away from my precious USPS, bro.
Yeah.
I would let him into the Department of Defense before the USPS, bro. My boys in blue, they need to be untouched by Elon's grubby fingers. As I was going through and writing all of those addresses, I was really thinking to myself, we do certainly have a lot of Southern California folks listening to this podcast. Maybe it's good to double down on the Dodgers love just for the pure economics of it.
Hey,
we also have a lot of people in the swamp.
That's right.
We've got a lot of people who live in Washington District of Columbia. I would say more than New York, more than LA for sure. Yeah, at least on my half.
You hand wrote your half, which I maybe got you a little bit closer to the listeners.
I'm in it for the love of the game, bro.
You are.
I'm in it for the love of the game.
For every apartment number, for every zip code.
And frankly, many of them are probably the wrong address because a lot of people probably didn't update their addresses, but we tried. I tried to get them to the right place. I apologize if you don't receive your holiday card. Speaking of holiday cards and Patreon, by the way, if you listen to this and you're very confused, over on the Patreon, patreon.com/tippingpitches, one of our top tier perks is that you can get a handwritten holiday card from me and or Alex every year at the end of the year. It's now the beginning of the new year, but it's not opening day yet. That's the like hard cutoff. We're over the first threshold of the competitive balance tax cutoff for when we can send the holiday cards, but we're not at the hard cap yet.
Right. There are holidays throughout the year. I will say it. The impact of maybe the design has softened.
Don't agree.
Okay. All right.
I like the design.
That's
still
great.
I think it's a 365.
Yeah, it's evergreen.
Thank you to this week's new patrons, Bradley and Justin. Should we just get right to it?
I think we should.
Why do you feel it's useful to do this idea at this point in the offseason? It's February now. We've had a majority of the top free agents have signed. There's still a couple outstanding bigger names. Alex Bregman, probably a top 5 available free agent. Pete Alonso, a top 5 name, maybe more like a top 15 player who is available on the free agent market this offseason. But for the most part, I think that the big dominoes have fallen, to borrow an oft-used phrase as we talk about offseason signings. I think the tenor of the discourse right now, and sure, we're like caught up in our own bubbles and seeing a lot of rage bait stuff, and algorithms have changed over the course of the last couple of years. So we're maybe not seeing the type of person that we're accustomed to seeing. We're seeing much more reactionary sports fans, I feel like, who are making a lot more noise. But I think the tenor of the conversation right now is like Dodgers are bad for baseball. Dodgers are ruining the sport. Every good player is going to sign with the Dodgers. Does that feel accurate to you? Not the presumptions within that, but that people think that.
Yes, I think so. I mean, you asked why we're doing this right now, and I do think it's like, well, first, as you said, we had to record something this week, but second of all, like, I think that in the last few years, there has been a growing awareness among fans of how baseball's economic system works, and I think by and large, that's a good thing. I think it's good to be an informed fan who actually understands the like mechanisms of the sport that you're watching, because it can allow you to think about it more critically if you so desire.
Right. And to push your own owner further.
Right. The other side of that is you can say, well, I think I kind of understand MLB's economic system, and that the Dodgers right there are the problem. Like, I think a lot of people have become really emboldened in sort of talking about money and how it flows through Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, I think conversations around the Dodgers and the Mets to a certain extent, and even, to a lesser degree, like the Yankees and the Phillies, are pushing people to make very broad, sweeping claims about the landscape of the sport right now and what needs to change. And you're seeing polls pop up where people are saying, I think we need a salary cap. You're seeing people again make these bold claims that the Dodgers are ruining the sport and you're going to lose fans and Manfred has to step in and do something.
That's my favorite one.
Right.
Like, Manfred's going to step up and he's going to walk up to Guggenheim Baseball Management Group,
Mm-hmm.
a group of dudes who write his fucking checks.
Yeah.
And he's going to be like, hey guys, stop.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Be like, I got an invisible hand that needs working, you know?
He's on his way out, you know? Maybe he's not afraid to step on a few toes, ruffle a few feathers.
But I think it's important to just like kind of set the record straight on a lot of these things, because I think a lot of people are making some bold proclamations based on a sort of fundamental misunderstanding of some of these core concepts. And I don't know, as folks who have pored over the collective bargaining agreement and spent years talking about this, I think it's worth it to sort of pull apart some of these narratives and see whether they actually hold up to scrutiny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to the idea that I'll say this before we start. Obviously, we've made it.
We have
an MO. Well, yeah, we fucking did it. You know, we're full-time content creators. We've made it an MO of the show to be like staunchly pro spending, pro owners throwing cash at players, pro free agent spending, because I think that is the most equitable redistribution of the revenues that come into the sport. That through a labor lens, my thinking on that has not changed even remotely. I think every owner should spend out the ass for every single player. I hope every free agent, aside from a select few who I think are reprehensible human beings, gets paid exorbitantly. Because if it, I know I've said this so many times over the years on the podcast, if it doesn't go to the players, it goes to the owners. That's it, period. There's no other option in this. It's not going back to the fans. It's not going to lower ticket prices. It's not going to lower concession prices. I do think that there are periods throughout baseball history where certain teams have been more standard deviations away from the rest of the pack in terms of competitiveness and wanting to actually spend and invest in the product. I think that the 70s to 2010s Yankees are the clearest example of this, where it's like Steinbrenner is going to spend everyone under the table, even when he's getting fucking death threats from the other owners about it. Not actually, but you know what I'm saying. Even as the other owners in the mid-1980s are colluding to not spend money on free agency, Steinbrenner is kind of doing his part during that period, but right before that and right after that, he's spending everyone else under the table, and it's working. At other periods within that time period, sure, there are other teams that are competing a little bit more. I think that the Dodgers have officially taken on that mantle. They are the new Yankees. They are perceived as having unfair advantages. Every quote-unquote small market fan who's not thinking super critically about things like revenue sharing, things like the competitive balance tax, the tax actually getting redistributed to the teams, these are things we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. They look at the Dodgers and they think that's where I'm going to lose my favorite player to. I don't know if necessarily all of that is true, but I do think that there is definitively a perception of that. And I don't think that that's like good for the game. I think that there's an argument to be made that that's not necessarily bad for the game. I think what it definitely is not the Dodgers' fault, which I'm hoping that this, like, full transparency before we even start the segment, that is the reason I wanted to do this, to make the case that, like, it's not really the Dodgers' fault. It's the collective 30 MLB owners buying into the system and allowing the Dodgers to be the fall guy, allowing previously the Yankees to be the fall guy. The 24 smallest market owners don't really give a shit which one of the big market teams your ire is pointed towards at the moment. They just are really pleased about the fact that it's pointed towards those people and not them. So with all that being said, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Do you want to just trade back and forth? I'll do one myth and then you do one myth.
I think that's a good idea.
All right. Here's my first myth. Every free agent signs with them. Every free agent goes to the Dodgers.
Juan Soto.
Well, okay, here's what I did.
Right. They got the biggest free agent signing of the offseason, right?
Not only did they not get the biggest free agent signing of the offseason, Alex, the 2025 top 30 free agents according to Fangraphs. Here's the distribution of the teams who got several of those free agents. The Dodgers got the 6th best free agent in Blake Snell. 6th. 5 better than that. 5. And now this wasn't including Sasaki, so you can say maybe he was the 2nd best free agent. So I'll give it to you. 2 and 6. And then they got the 11th best free agent. That was a re-signing of Teoscar Hernandez, someone that no one wanted to sign last year.
Right.
Really. They got the 19th best free agent. That was Tanner Scott. And they got the 20th best free agent. That's Blake Trinan. That was a re-signing of a 37-year-old reliever who they've had on the team for 6 years. 6, 11, 19, 20 plus Sasaki. Good offseason.
Mm-hmm.
None of the top 5 and 2 relievers. I'm just stating the facts.
Wait, you forgot Kirby Yates, though.
Yes, but he was not one of the top 30 free agents. I'm sorry. He wasn't. Okay, I trust my friends over at Fangraphs. The Texas Rangers, they got the 17th and 29th player. The Baltimore Orioles, big market, Baltimore, 21st and 30th. Toronto, who everybody has been crying about them finishing last for all these players and not being able to spend their money no matter what. They ended up with 30th, 27th, and 12th. Like kind of the closest comp to the Dodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is like break up baseball because of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Right.
The Yankees got 7th and 18th, and also they made a couple important trades. And the Mets, my beloved New York Mets, they got 28, 15, and the number 1 player in the top 30 free agents of 2025. I don't think that those are really that different. Now, if we go back to the last 3 years, in 2023, the Dodgers only signed one of the top 30 free agents, and that was re-signing Clayton Kershaw.
Mm-hmm.
I do think this basically comes down to residue, and I think this is going to be a theme of a lot of what we talk about today. This comes down to residue of last offseason. It's the confluence of factors that we're experiencing right now. If you divorced what the Dodgers have done this offseason with what happened over the last 13 months, I don't think people would be even remotely as mad. 2024, they signed...
You're talking about Ohtani.
They signed Ohtani, who is obviously the top free agent available, the top free agent of all time. I think we can't ignore the knock-on effect of whatever team got the top free agent of all time was always going to be perceived as having some sort of unfair advantage, especially given the deferred money, which maybe we should talk about next. And then they got the second best player in Yamamoto. That 1-2 punch, I don't think that we can ignore that as carrying over into this offseason. People started to plant the seeds of being that mad at the Dodgers last year, and then them actually winning. I think the plant flowered because of that. But if you just go on the last 3 years in total, they got the 1 and 2 top free agents last year. The 2 being sort of like a fluke that Yamamoto was even available in the way that he was. And then this year with Sasaki, another fluke, kind of. And we are going to talk about the perception that they're going to get every big Japanese player as well. I could see how you would think oh yeah, their players at the top of the free agent market every year, but they're not just getting every best player all the time. They don't have Manny Machado on their team. They chose not to re-sign him. They don't have Bryce Harper on their team. They don't have Mike Trout on their team. They don't have Juan Soto on their team. All of these generational guys who have come up for free agency and that we've perceived as some of the best free agents ever available in the history of the sport, given their age and their production up into that level. A lot of these guys aren't on the Dodgers. The Phillies signed away Trey Turner from the Dodgers, even though the Dodgers were interested in keeping him. After they traded for Max Scherzer, they didn't re-sign him. Yes, they're good. Yes, they signed top free agents. I'm not totally convinced that they have some unbelievable advantage in free agency that other teams can't tap into if they're willing to match on the money.
No, I think you're right. I mean, the idea that the Dodgers get all the good free agents is just patently false. I think they develop and extend or trade for and extend as much as they make splashes in the free agent markets, right? They took advantage of the Red Sox wanting to reset the luxury tax.
Yeah.
And said, yeah, we'll pick up Mookie Betts,
Yeah.
Of
28
course.
other teams could have done that deal. They just weren't willing to re-sign Mookie Betts, and so it wasn't as worth it.
Right, exactly. But they didn't land Judge. They didn't land, you mentioned Machado. They didn't land Correa. They let Corey Seager walk, They
didn't get Adames. They didn't, even this offseason, they didn't get a lot of those other guys.
Right. And you could argue oh, well, they didn't need those guys. Well, then that's the point right there. They're not spending above what they need to do. They are actually strategically deploying a lot of their money. And sometimes they say, yes, we know this is a bit of an overspend, but we think that that's worth it for, quote unquote, overspend given whatever the market says this player is worth. But they also see value in having Shohei Ohtani on their team long term, beyond the literal baseball impact that he makes.
I think my point here is that, in other words, they're using free agency like it's supposed to be used.
Right.
And other teams aren't.
Yes.
Other teams are taking themselves out of the running for players like way before they should. I mean, we clown the Rays for checking in on Juan Soto this offseason. Like, if it weren't the Rays, maybe it should have been the Rangers. Maybe it should have been... the Rangers are kind of a bad example because they actually have spent more than most teams of their size have.
Yeah.
It should have been the Mariners. You know who would have really helped the Seattle Mariners? Juan Soto. For $50 million a year. You know what the Mariners' payroll is right now? Their luxury tax payroll. So this is including all of the other bullshit. This is keeping them under the luxury tax. I mean, I'm not saying that Soto would have signed there, but like, what are we talking about here? It's not the Dodgers' fault. It's not the Mets' fault that only 3 teams wanted to actually play ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
4 teams, I guess. The Red Sox, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and I guess Toronto. So 5 teams.
Yeah. This is the claim, you mentioned them earlier, but this is the claim that was levied against the Yankees in the early 2000s as well, right? Is that they're just buying championships, which ignores the elite player development that the Dodgers have put together.
Yeah.
And also ignores the fact that they're not the only big spenders, right? That they did not even have the highest payroll last year.
No. They do have the highest payroll now. But we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get
All right. Do you want to do one? You want to do a myth?
Let's do one.
Do you feel like I busted that myth?
I think you busted.
I think some people are going to be still mad.
We need a soundboard. Busted.
Okay. That's it. I'm just going to keep replaying you saying that. Busted.
All right. Myth number 2. The Dodgers' deferred salaries provide an unfair advantage.
This is great. Okay. This is great. I love this one. I love deferred salary chat because it's like, I always see people wading into the waters of the collective bargaining agreement, not knowing that like we're waiting there, not knowing that I'm there already.
Right. We're the alligators sitting on the
precisely
on the surface of the water.
And or, not to be a little bit too haughty about it, but like we were born in the darkness. Like you we were molded in it, shaped by it. You merely adopted the collective bargaining agreement.
Right.
Random Twitter account.
So this claim has been a very popular one in the past couple months in the wake of the Sasaki signing, but also going back to Shohei Ohtani, is I think really when people started sort of waking up to deferred salaries as like a real strategic possibility for teams. Obviously, and we may talk about this in a minute, but like teams have been just deferring salaries for years at this point.
Bro, you go back to the 1960s.
Yes.
Teams would defer salaries by buying annuities for players or buying life insurance policies for players from random insurance companies that the player named by choice.
Yeah.
Deferred salaries are as old as baseball itself.
Yeah.
Owners don't want to pay right now. Players don't want to be in a higher tax bracket.
Right.
Simple as that. It's the reason that it's in the CBA and neither side is mad about it.
Right. Well, and so there's this idea that they are avoiding spending all of this money right now. They're kicking the can down the road. And so they're only paying Shohei Ohtani $2 million this year, Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. That gives them so much room.
It gives them an extra $68 million
on their luxury tax. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't.
What?
Here are a few things we can talk about. As you mentioned,
it's giving high school debate class a little bit, like mock trial.
First of all, this is explicitly permitted.
Did you ever have to do a mock trial?
No, I never did debate.
Yo, I did one for Sacco and Vanzetti. Politically explosive one to hand to a 7th grader. Let me tell you that.
I bet. Did you want to recreate it right now?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
All I'm saying is, no, I'm not going to say it. Let's just keep going.
So again, deferred salaries are not a loophole that the Dodgers are taking advantage of. That is law You're allowed to do this. Any team can do this. That's point number one. There's not a rule that's being broken. But I kind of don't even really care about that one because teams also break rules all the time.
Right.
But I think the more important points are, first of all, that's not how luxury tax is calculated, right? They are taking the average annual value of the player's salary to determine what the luxury tax hit is on any given year.
Kind of. They're not taking average annual value.
Well, right.
They're taking net present
value. Yes.
Well, I do think
they're
that
taking average of the net present value.
Correct. Yes.
Is the better way of putting it.
I do think that some people have actually internalized that, and I've gotten in back and forths with people on X the Everything app arguing that it should just be straight average annual value, that there's no sense in breaking down the net present value annually because that actually does give them a discount. To that, I would say this is true, but all teams get the same discount.
Yes.
And all teams defer money on some percentage of their contracts. And so it helps all teams equally, except it helps all teams proportionately, equitably. It helps the Dodgers more in total deferment benefit because they're spending more. Mm-hmm. So it helps them more because they're actually using this. It helps the teams that spend, which I actually would argue that is like, we should incentivize teams to be able to spend. And deferring money, in theory, helps a team that doesn't have as much cash flow right now. Because all they have to do is, as you're about to, I'm sure, outline, fund the escrow, not necessarily have all of the cash up front.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm just a little bit baffled because I actually don't think people look beyond the AAV versus net present value annually distinction and how it contributes to the competitive balance tax threshold number. Because I don't think people understand how much goes into that CBT number that is not just player payroll. That is player benefit plans. That is retirement benefits for players. That is a lot of different things that are being factored into that are more complicated economic and financial mechanisms than just this is what the players get paid. There's a lot more complicated financial maneuvering that is going on about the competitive balance tax than just net present value that I don't think people even know about or like into. And so I'm like, if you want to just say like the competitive balance tax threshold should be player contracts only, player spending only, then we can talk about that. But the teams don't want that because they want to inflate these other numbers and they want to count whatever other contributions they have to make because that helps their overall financial picture, not just what they're putting onto the field.
Yeah.
I hope that made sense. It was kind of really Byzantine and confusing, but I hope that makes sense to people.
Well, and like, frankly, a lot of this stuff is kind of Byzantine and confusing, which is why we're trying to do this, right? But to your point, like, that from the player's perspective, that's for my money. That's great. I'll be living in a state that doesn't tax me as much, you know.
Well, we're all going to be living in a state that doesn't tax at all. Because
all right,
we're not going to have a.
But again, you know, like the dollar that the Dodgers are putting towards Shohei Ohtani today is worth the same that the dollar that the Mets would put towards Shohei Ohtani today. Like the value of that money is going to change over time. But from a team to team perspective, like you said, they are all receiving the same quote unquote discount, so to speak.
Yes.
And they have to start funding these escrow accounts anyway.
Precisely.
They are not actually just spending $2 million on Shohei Ohtani and paying him $68 million in 2030 from that. Like, I think the CBA calls out that you have to start funding the escrow account like a year and a half after
after the contract is signed.
After the contract is starts being paid out.
Yes.
Right? Which means starting in like July of next year, the Dodgers are going to start putting $40-something million into an escrow account.
I believe it's like 43 into an escrow because they're paying 2, and the net present value of the contract is like just under 46.
Right. Exactly.
This is how these teams operate.
This is how it works.
I don't know what to tell you. teams are funding via investing their money into bonds and stocks and all these things in the S&P 500 more broadly. They're funding future contracts that they haven't even signed.
Yeah.
Like, this is how corporations, I hate to break it to you guys, but like, this is how corporations work. They're taking out loans, you know? JP Morgan is funding a lot of these contracts. Like, the Dodgers aren't putting $700 million into a vault and giving Ohtani 70 of it every year.
Right.
They're not. If you break into Dodger Stadium, you're not going to find the vault where their Shohei Ohtani's contract money is being saved. It's not. These are funny. These are figments. These are financial figments of the imagination, as all corporations over a certain size operate under. These are, I mean, I know I went into a whole rant on our CBA Explainer deep dive pod about debt servicing, but if you want to talk about the debt servicing of different organizations, it's a mess. It's a mess. And the commissioner and the ownership side has allowed leniency on debt servicing for decades now. And if you want to start getting really strict on debt servicing and some of these more macroeconomic forces that the teams are benefiting from, dude, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. Let's open up these books and start talking about it. But until then, like, the Dodgers are not employing some unequal benefit that all the other teams are also not employing, even though they haven't signed these contracts. I would argue that the contract that Ohtani signed offered to the Dodgers, offered similarly to the other team to try and match or beat or whatever. That contract structure made it possible for all 30 Major League Baseball teams to be able to afford Shohei Ohtani. Now, whether they could actually pitch him on coming to their team is a different thing.
Right. There are other intangibles.
There are other intangibles, and there are also other on-field things that the Dodgers can offer that the other teams were not willing to offer to Ohtani.
Right. Like, we're trying to win.
Yes. Like, we get other good players. Like, we're not the Angels. We're not just going to have you and one other really great guy who gets hurt all the time and then fucking randos. No offense. But it is that's the case. So, yeah, dude, the deferred money is actually awesome for small market teams who don't have the money to pay now. The owners just don't want to do it because they don't want to be committed. They don't want to be committed to actually having to build a team around this person.
Right. Well, and I mean, you mentioned, like, you know, there's no vault of Shohei Ohtani money, but like, they're low key. I mean, they're it's not like they're doing anything with it, right? But they are funding something that will eventually be paid out to him,
yes.
Right? And they just get to invest $45 million today, knowing that, hey, whatever, it'll go up 5% over the next 5 or 6 years, and then we're golden. And now we have the money to pay Shohei Ohtani what he's worth. And also, hey, guess what? The league is doing great, and we're still raking in revenue. So what the fuck is it to us?
Right. Yeah.
It's not an unfair advantage. Every other team could do this. They just don't necessarily bring all the other factors to the table as well. Deferred salaries are not the only thing that are going to allow your team to be competitive or convince players to come play with you.
Deferred salaries are the most explicit example of you have to spend money to make money that we have in sports. You have to actually fund the contract to make the future money to pay the deferment payment. You actually, in order to utilize that benefit, you have to put some cash up front, and it's going to pay off in the long run, unless the economy totally collapses, in which case, like, I think Guggenheim will be all right, you know?
They will have been the one to crash it, so. All right, should we move on to your next myth?
I mean, you want to punish Guggenheim for financial crimes. The Ohtani contract is like 900th on the list?
Yeah.
If that? Like, just from 2024 alone? Okay, the next one. I think we hear a lot of conversation about the salary cap. There should be a salary cap to rein in the Dodgers spending. Let's talk about the salary cap quickly, because we talked about it last week on State of Labor in Baseball with Bauman. We've talked about it so many times over the years about how salary cap would not actually really help with competitive balance, particularly in a sport like baseball. According to Fangraphs roster research, which is just an exceptional resource and it's wonderfully laid out. I'm just going to really quickly run through the competitive balance tax figures currently for the Major League Baseball teams as they stand right now. Now, of course, some of these figures will change as the rest of the free agents on the board sign. Athletics, $106 million. Alex, by God, they've crossed the $105 million threshold, and they are not going to have a grievance filed against them. They fucking did it. And before we continue, the competitive balance tax for the base level this year is $241. So that's the number that like teams are basically treating like, if we go over this, it's a much bigger financial commitment than if we're right under this. 241. So again, Athletics, 106 million. Orioles, 173 million. Red Sox, 210. White Sox, 86. Cleveland, 118. Detroit, 140. Houston, 236. That's notable. Kansas City, 167. Angels, 206. Minnesota, 149. Yankees, 303. Seattle, 168. Tampa Bay, 119. I love it when the Rays are spending like 8 teams under the table. Rangers, 235. Blue Jays, 273. Diamondbacks, 215. Braves, 230. Cubs, 207. Reds, 134. Rockies, 144. Dodgers, 383. Marlins, 84. Brewers, 135. Mets, 298. Phillies, 308. Pirates, 104. Padres, 245. Giants, 217. Cardinals, 163. Nationals, 131. That is what every team is spending this year currently.
All right, I've got it all locked away.
That's 6 teams over the threshold. It's more than half the league, $100 million under the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
So this notion that like a salary cap, just lowering those 6 teams by a little bit, that is going to suddenly mean that all of these other teams, which right now are currently cashing not just revenue sharing checks from the 50% of the local market revenue that is being split equally among teams, but also the checks from going over, allowing the big market teams to actually spend and go over the competitive balance tax and redistribute that money a second time. The notion that that's going to make a team like the Reds spend $100 million more per year. I mean, that's just laughable. Like, that is just this idea that the cap is going to be 200 or 190 or whatever, and that you're going to convince the rest of the league to spend $54 million to hit the salary cap floor. That's not going to happen, dude.
Right. Or that it's going to stop the Dodgers from continuing to spend creatively and smartly.
And on top of that, if you rein them in and you say, okay, let's just say, for example, just for round number purposes, if you rein in the Dodgers and say now the hard cap is $200 million, the Dodgers can't spend over $200 million. So they're going to spend 200, and all of those other teams that I just listed off that are at like 100 or 80 in the case of the Marlins, they're going to spend whatever the minimum is, which is like, what are those owners going to agree to as a minimum?
Mm-hmm.
If they're spending 80 now, what are they going to agree as the minimum? Are they going to suddenly be okay with spending 180? I don't think so. No. Then you really have to rely on your farm system. And I have bad news for people. Like, I know I said this last week about the Dodgers. They do that better than everyone too. Their farm system rankings to end the last 5 years, according to Fangraphs, 2nd, 6th, 7th, 13th, 20th, and 3rd. And the reason that they were 20th and 13th is because they traded away all their good players to get better players in 2020 and 2021. So I'm like a little bit baffled by the idea of how a salary cap would actually hurt the Dodgers and help those other worse teams. Because you're not convincing Bob Castellini or Mark Attanasio or John Stanton to spend $70 million more when there's not going to really be another mechanism to give them more money. The mechanism that we have now is the thing that's supposed to be giving them more money. And they're already getting half of the Dodgers' revenue split up. I don't know, right?
Yeah. Can I read you a tweet real quick that came in the wake of one of LA's acquisitions?
Yeah.
Some franchises worry about things that may not even matter 6 years down the line. And some franchises figure out how to maximize the current window with their generational player and add another generational player to the roster. The tale of 2 front offices. That is about last night's trade of Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis in the league with a salary cap.
Yeah.
You're telling me the salary cap is the thing that actually is going to keep owners from not wanting to pay their superstar? Is going to actually encourage them to retain those players? This is how sports work. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you. There's disparity sometimes.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just don't always really get what fans are pining for. Do you want just a set salary
that
allocation
makes?
for every team? Every player makes $10 million. Okay, good luck. Hey, I'm into it. The rest of the revenues can go fund fucking schools. I don't know. If you actually want to talk about that, let's talk about that. But I don't really think that's what fans want. I think deep down inside are upset that their owner is not trying. But frankly, that's a harder argument to make than it is those guys are spending too much when you've been beaten over the head for the last century with this idea that actually throwing money at the problem is morally wrong, is the morally bad thing to do. That doesn't indicate smarts. That just indicates wealth. And that's, for whatever reason, bad in this corner of society, even though we allow it in the rest of this.
Right. Also, there are plenty. I know we talk all the time about how like investment, competitive efforts, payroll, these are the only things that we can reliably say are going to put teams back in the playoffs, right? Like, for all that we've said about how wonderful Moneyball has been for the idea of being able to evaluate player talent, like, I'm waiting for the A's to hang the banner. I'm waiting for the Rays to hang the banner. I'm waiting for the Brewers to hang the banner. It's not just that really gets you these titles, but for all that you can say about how spending can open your window, it's not like the dumb teams have been able to spend their way to a World Series, right? Like, the Tigers gave Javier Baez $180 million.
Even the smart teams haven't been able to spend their way to a World Series.
Yes.
I mean, like, it helps for sure, but it's not. I'm gonna read my next myth because I think it like goes to this discussion.
Yeah.
Is this idea that like the Dodgers are just destroying MLB's competitive balance, right? With all of their spending, the balance of the league has just shifted, and it's not fair anymore. Here are just some recent World Series winners: the Dodgers, the Rangers, the Astros, the Braves, the Dodgers, the Nationals, the Red Sox, the Astros, the Cubs, the Royals, the Giants, the Red Sox. I'll stop there because I don't want to reference 2010 to 2012.
Yep. I think the 2010 to 2012 is relevant, though.
Giants, Cardinals, Giants.
Okay, if you take it back to 2010, which team has the unfair advantage? Which team needs to be broken up? The Giants?
Yes.
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm saying. They've won more World Series than the Dodgers have in that time frame. 10, 12, and 14. That's more than the Dodgers have won in that time frame. I mean, obviously the Dodgers have been better, but during the regular season.
Right. It doesn't care. You had like,
am I supposed to tell Giants fans, like, no, actually, you're supposed to be more concerned about the Dodgers being bad for baseball because they won more regular season games than you and signed Ohtani?
Right.
Like, no, actually, I know someone who has the 3 years that the Giants won the World Series in the 2010s tattooed on their rib cage. Is he supposed to be more upset about competitive balance because his team wasn't spending to the point where other fans were like, we can't do what they're doing?
Right.
Like, you can't do what they're doing. You didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do what the Dodgers are doing either because they're doing their own unique blend of trying to compete.
Right. But also 5 out of the 12 of last year's playoff teams won fewer than 90 games.
Yeah.
Like, regular season dominance does not equate to playoff dominance. Hell, in 2023, an NL West team that was not named the Los Angeles Dodgers made it to the World Series.
Yes.
On a payroll south of like 150 million.
After sweeping the Dodgers in the first round.
So like, I don't know.
Your point.
And eventually you have to just go out and play the game.
Yes. Your point when we were doing prep for the show, I think was a relevant one. I think that what fans are actually asking for is like, they want to bring the reserve clause back.
Yeah.
They don't really want free agency because they don't want players to be able to choose where they want to play based on how much the team is actually trying to compete.
Well, and because spending money is not a skill, right? That is not a skill that I can quantify. That's not what baseball is about, right? Baseball is about identifying players and developing players and then letting the players play and then doing international crimes on spreadsheets and
that's the Dodgers too, though.
That is the Dodgers too, and
all the other teams.
Right.
But the Dodgers famously put it on a spreadsheet.
But it's like it's harkening back to some quote unquote idealized version of the game that never really existed.
I'm going to tell you about the idealized version of the game real quick.
Well, let's talk about it.
The reserve clause was abolished in 1975. Free agency gradually became what we know it to be now in the late 70s, early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
They, in order to avoid flooding the market and suppressing the value of those players, they trickled out the actual free agency based on service time at the time.
Right.
But
and famously, there were actually no dynasties before that either.
Well,
from 72 to 74, I think there was great parity in the league.
I'll give you the 50 years before 1975. So from the middle...
1974, 1973.
Yeah, we're going to go line by line.
Okay.
What comes before 1973? This is a tough one.
Line.
For the 50 years before 1975, which is the last time we had some financial mechanism that was approaching a salary cap, because we were suppressing the salaries of all of the players because they couldn't go to another team. Okay, here are the World Series winners. The Braves got one. The Mets got one. Giants, they got two. This is in 50 years. The Reds, they got two. The Orioles got two. The Pirates got three. The Tigers got three. The Dodgers, hey, they got four. Now we're talking. The A's, they got five. The Cardinals got 8. And the New York Yankees got 19 World Series in 50 years. That is the level of parity that you're pining for by suppressing the financial mechanisms that allow money to actually be spent. Bro, I don't even know what to like this. It's just ahistorical at this point. Like, oh, should we look around at all the other leagues that have so much parity? Like, yeah, dude, the fucking Lakers have won 20 titles. Like, the Celtics have won 16, you know? Like, what are we even talking about?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is just that the Dodgers are better at this game than anyone else, right? It's like...
Now they are, yeah.
Now they are,
yeah.
Yes. If you were spending willy-nilly like the Yankees, like, I mean, it still works for them, right? But then you could also say, they're just throwing money at the problem. It's happening to work out. I think the problem now is that the Dodgers are really smart at how they spend their money.
Yeah, bro.
But also
being good at building a team is not a like. Last time I checked, like, isn't that the point of sports?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Like, it becomes so warped when it's like they are one of a few teams doing it, and the other teams are like so actively not doing it, and so have so actively not been doing it for so long that now it's become the norm. Like, I mean, I feel a little crazy for how long we've been yelling about the Pirates, you know, how long we've been yelling about the Reds, how long I've been personally yelling about the Mariners. But like, they are so much further in the other direction in terms of like competitiveness, or even if you want to take the Marlins, for example, or the A's, or all of these other teams, like, they are spending half of what these other teams, even the other teams who are in the middle to bottom of the pack, they're spending half. The A's completed a calendar year recently where their payroll was under $50 million. I mean, like, it's actually insane what we have allowed these owners to get away with on the lower end by distracting ourselves about yelling about the upper end, and which team is spending $20 million more than they should be for the exact right quota of competitiveness.
Yeah, just a reminder that there's a team who's by choice playing in a minor league stadium for the next 3 years.
Can I do my next myth?
Yes.
We've been going for a while now, and I've just been yelling. I hope this is coherent. Okay, the next myth that I have here is they have more money than everyone else. I don't think that this is a myth. I do think the Dodgers make more money than basically everybody except the Yankees.
Yes.
I think it falls short of explaining the reality of what baseball's economy is meant to be like. Yes, the Dodgers make more. The Dodgers also spend more, as we've been talking about. They spend more on players. They also spend more on other things, like actually reinvesting and updating their stadium. They do things like that. They spend more on marketing their franchise. They spend more on player development. They spend more on facilities in their player development pipeline. They spend more on the team plane. They spend more on a lot of things. And I would argue that that's part of the reason that they make more, number one. Number two, have we just forgotten about revenue sharing entirely? I mean, actually though, because the Dodgers are not making more proportionally than the big market teams have ever made in relationship to the middle and smaller market teams, right? Like, they're making a lot, but so is everyone. You know, like, you can find the information on the local RSNs for a lot of these teams. Even the bad ones are making like tens of millions of dollars. Some teams are approaching $100 million a year on their local RSN deals, even though they're not in huge markets. Like, the lowest ones are 30 and 40 and 50, and those ones were in the process of being renegotiated even as the RSN bubble is bursting. And that's not even to mention what MLB is giving these teams on national deals and national sponsorship deals. And don't even get me started on what all of these teams are making on sports betting now. I mean, it's exorbitant. Before a pitch is thrown in 2025, every single team knows for certain they will have $100 million just in TV money. All of them. That's fucking crazy that you could have that much money and yet still your CBT number is under 100 million. I mean, where's the rest of the money going, Alex? Where is it going?
I know.
That's just from TV deals. That's from your local and your national deal. That's not even counting how much money you're getting paid out because the Dodgers are making so much more. The Dodgers, let's say they took in $500 million last year. They keep 250 of it, and the rest of the 250 goes to be split evenly among the other teams. Now, the Dodgers get some of the other teams' money too. That's how revenue sharing works. They're doing socialism over there.
Right.
Or at least they're doing like old school trust capitalism. I don't know. And then the fact that the Dodgers are going over the competitive balance tax, all the rest of those teams are getting that money too. Everybody except those 6 teams that I mentioned. The Padres, the Phillies, the Mets, the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and the Dodgers. They're all getting a check from the fact that those teams are spending over.
Yeah.
And where is it going, man? Like, the Dodgers have always had a financial advantage in terms of raw numbers. They're operating on a slightly different scale. But again, to your point about parity, I'm not exactly sure what people are suggesting is the alternative. Like, have the Dodgers make less money? Because then your team will also get less money. Like, I don't think people understand that, like, we should slow the Dodgers down. Then the Marlins get less money in that circumstance too, because then their revenue sharing check is less. Like, the Pirates get less money too, because then their revenue sharing check is less. Half of what the Dodgers make is being shared by the whole league.
Yeah. I think the idea that like the Dodgers spending is ahistorical when compared to the rest of the league, or that the Dodgers spending is out of line when compared to the rest of the league, is just ahistorical.
It's wrong.
Like, I think it is just wrong. If you go back to the early 2000s, teams like the A's and the Rays were spending $25 million, while the Yankees were spending $200 million. Right? Yeah. 2005, the Rays opening day payroll was $29 million. The Yankees was $205 million.
Yeah.
Right?
The Dodgers are not spending almost 10 times as much as any team right now.
No, not even close. If even still, right? Even still, you have teams who are very clearly lagging behind the average payroll. And that has far more to do with them not keeping up with how the game's revenue has grown over the last 2 decades than it has anything to do with the Dodgers running laps around the league and going, above and beyond what other teams are able to do. It is actually the lower half of the league that has not kept up with the growth of the game and, have not expressed any interest in reinvesting in that. Sorry you missed out on like the boom, the TV boom in the early 2000s or whatever.
Yeah, the Dodgers had the 5th highest payroll last year.
Right.
5th.
Yeah.
5th highest payroll. I mean, they have the highest payroll this year. Sure. But they lined it up this way, Other teams could line it up this way. Plenty of other teams, were they good enough at player evaluation and salary allocation, could have decided to strategically reset their luxury tax, knowing that Shohei Ohtani, the greatest free agent in the history of sports, was going to be up for a large contract. Well, I'm sorry you didn't look more than 3 months in the future. I think that there's a lot of front office executives and money people and owners more broadly salivating over the fact that so many fans are preemptively taking themselves out of the race for the top free agents by assuming that their team has no chance to sign them, because it gives them an out. It gives them well, you didn't expect us to sign him and we didn't try. If every team was expected to be in on at least the top 10 free agents, not necessarily the top 1 or 2 or 3, maybe those guys always will end up going to one of the 5 biggest markets just because those are more attractive places for those people to live and play. Sure. Maybe not with some select people. I mean, we're ignoring the fact that like Corbin Burns signed in Arizona, right? Like we're ignoring the fact that Willie Adames signed in San Francisco. We're ignoring a lot of shit right now, for one. But even if we're allowing that...
It's convenient for my argument.
Even if we're allowing that fallacy to persist, baseball's like a 26-man roster, man. There's a lot of building around the edges that you could do that could overcome the fact that you don't have Shohei Ohtani. I would argue the rest of the AL West had been doing that for the last 6 years before last year.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to do one more myth? I have one more on here, but I don't really know how to bust it other than something that we talked about last week. So maybe we can do that one last.
All right. Well, my last one is a little more qualitative anyway. So we can just kind of like banter about this last one. But like, and I think this one kind of captures a lot of different threads that we've been talking about, right? But I think the most common thing that you are seeing right now, seeing your average online fan say, which is maybe not the best thing for me to be reading from my mental health, but c'est la vie, I do a baseball podcast, is that the Dodgers are making the sport unwatchable, right? They are going to lead to the death of the league. Again, we talk about parity, we talk about spending, like they are so far and beyond any other team in the league that it's not sustainable, and frankly, it's just going to turn fans off from the league. This is just one. It's hard to disprove because I don't have a crystal ball. But the idea that people all of a sudden hate dynasties, damn, that's crazy. The Chiefs have been really good the last few years. You know what I assume is doing poorly then is the NFL.
Right.
I assume no one watches that league anymore because there's a salary cap, and yet there's still a team that dominates the field. And so therefore, why does any other team try? Right? All the other teams, I assume, have just given up.
Well, notably, I mean, the ratings on Warriors Cavs, those were bad ratings for the NBA.
Yeah.
Silver was like, fuck, I don't know. I still have a job.
Exactly. No one's interested in watching good teams.
This is part of a collective societal race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't want people to be good at things. We want people to be less bad.
Yeah.
I don't know how to fix that, really. Like, I don't know. It's far more compelling to me from a qualitative perspective if the Dodgers get beat now that the target is fully on their back, than it ever was before, when it was like, lol, Dodgers only got a Mickey Mouse World Series. We speed ran the Dodgers are fraudulent and can't win in the playoffs to now the Dodgers are like the 1920s Yankees.
Right, you should rewrite the game
in the course
rules.
of 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months. The owner should rip up the fucking CBA and lock the players out for a year because the Dodgers won once, 1.5 times, if you want to be an asshole about it. All right, last myth. Every Japanese player will just sign there now. This myth is super racist. Super racist, bro. Like, that's the way I guess I would bust it.
Yeah.
It's like every Japanese player is put on a conveyor belt to LA. That's a really bad notion to put out into the world. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Like, every white player will sign with the Rangers. I'm going to start rumors like that. Like, fucking all the white players are signing with the Rangers, dude. It's crazy. All the weird conservatives are signing with the Braves. That's an unfair advantage. We got to stop it. We got to stop it. We got to do political litmus tests. We got to do racial quotas.
We do, yeah.
And that'll make the sport more competitive. because it's just nuts. But Bauman said it on the pod last week. I suppose on balance, it's a little bit of an advantage that the Dodgers have to sign Japanese players, that they've already signed the 2 best, now 3 best Japanese players to come over since Ichiro. I guess you could sort of quibble because we don't know yet about Sasaki and we don't know yet about Yamamoto's career. And obviously Darvish has had a wonderful career in Major League Baseball, but he came over when he was older. So the 3 best prospects or players that have been on the market. Number 1, guys, the Dodgers didn't actually get Ohtani the first time around. They had to prove to him that they could sign him in free agency. That's number 1. Number 2, I don't think it's so much of an advantage, like Bauman said, that we should start enforcing racial quotas on how many players teams are allowed to sign from Japan.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like so you should start making your team hospitable to Japanese players.
Well,
you should make it a place they want to come play and feel like welcomed.
I mean, there's a reason that the Blue Jays finished second on all of the Japanese players, and it isn't that their team is great. And it isn't that they're spending every other team under the table, and it isn't that they're going to have a dynasty.
Right.
It's that they have some Japanese players on their team, and they've made it hospitable, and it's a decent city to want to live in if you are not from America.
Right.
You know what would be cool? Fucking not living in America, dude. If I'm an international free agent and I'm coming over, I might actually choose the Blue Jays just because they're not in America. There's all these different sort of like ineffable factors that go into why the Dodgers have signed 3 of the most famous and touted Japanese baseball players of the last decade. I think just as equally there could be a lot of unexplainable things that would make a Japanese player not want to sign in LA. Like the fact that there's already so much pressure and there's already such an expectation around coming and playing with Ohtani, coming and playing with your other Japanese national teammates. Like the fact that though LA is a really cool place to live if you're rich, it's also burning to the ground. I think eventually some free agents might have to consider that. Should we start giving the Dodgers handouts because they have to make a pitch that involves fire insurance for players? Like, I don't understand a way to legislate out the fact that people want to play for the Dodgers because they're good and try. And ultimately, as we wrap up this Mythbusters segment here, I think that like my largest takeaway is just I don't see them exploiting anything that any other team has not either already exploited or could exploit now if they actually gave a shit.
Yeah, I mean, this is a league that, as it stands, rewards complacency and punishes ambition, generally speaking.
That's a bar.
The fact that the Dodgers are flouting that should be celebrated, if anything.
Let them cook. Why'd we even do the whole segment? You could have just said that, dude. You could have just said that. We just wasted an hour of our lives. All right, let's
do some listener questions.
Yeah, let's take a quick break first so that I can catch my breath, and then we'll come back and do some listener questions. All right, let's do some listener questions.
All right.
Thanks to everybody who listened to us shill for the Dodgers for the last 80 minutes. First question comes from Dawson. What current or former MLB player would have the best shot on Celebrity Bake Off? I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what Celebrity Bake Off is.
I think it's like the celebrity version of Great British Bake Off.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that show?
Do you think a good podcast idea would be like you explaining pop culture things to me?
I think so. You can explain who Luka Doncic is to me in return.
He's really good.
Oh.
Yeah. High usage. Ball dominant. He's the evolution of James Harden.
I love ball dominant players.
You're somewhat of a ball dominant type yourself. I don't know. Who do you think? I'm just learning about this for the first time. I kind of inferred that it would be like they have to bake.
Yes. Yeah.
Bryce Harper. Yeah. Yeah.
The baking king of TikTok right now. You saw his banana bread, right?
I did. I don't think it looked like that great. Banana bread is like sneaky the easiest thing to bake.
Wow. Get his ass.
I'm just saying that from personal experience. Like, it's kind of hard to fuck up a banana bread. I mean, the one thing that can happen to you is that you can over or undercook it.
Right. You can make it
pretty easily.
Really dry.
But either way, it's going to taste good. It's going to taste like bananas and sugar.
Yeah, his did look a little on the dry side to me. There was a little too much crumble for my taste. But
you should have put some raw milk, dip it in some raw milk, you know? I don't know. Like, the thing about whenever we get questions about, like, what baseball player would you want to see participate in pop culture event X, it's always like the same 10 guys who are actually interesting.
Right. Well, I'm like, I don't know anything about these guys. I don't know who knows how to bake. Sean Doolittle probably cooks something.
Maybe.
I think he'd be
great on this.
I think he would be a great candidate for that kind of show.
Well, I think especially because like a key to an interesting watch on a cooking or baking event is like just a healthy dose of neuroticism and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that makes it more relatable to the average person. And to that end, it's like relievers, you know, do little Ottavino.
Right.
Ottavino would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I would love to see Edwin.
That would be a really good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Play the song. Grant Balfour. I want to see him pacing in front of the proofing door.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who else. I mean, there's probably a whole crop of dudes who have never used an oven.
Right.
And that would be entertaining in its own way. I don't think that would be good for the show necessarily.
No.
I think a more interesting question would be, which one of these guys would you want to see on Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay yelling at them?
Bryce Harper.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Which baseball player would not swing on Gordon Ramsay? That's a good question. Is there a guy that you think is like sneaky great at baking? I tried to look this up. But then I Googled it and it was like, it gave me some player from the 1980s whose nickname was Bake. And I was like, okay, thanks a lot. I'm really glad that DeepSeek came for your fucking companies now.
That's actually how we prepped for this podcast, right?
DeepSeek?
Chat GPT jokes are over. DeepSeek jokes are in.
All right. I don't really totally understand what's going on with the DeepSeek thing, but I don't.
I'll reveal it to you on our pop culture podcast.
Okay, great. All I know is that Sam Altman looks like a fucking idiot, and it's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
would it surprise you to learn that he also is an idiot?
No, that would not surprise me at all. Isn't he like one of the effective altruism guys?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's working out really well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he could be the DNC chair next time around.
Don't put that idea out into the world.
It can't get worse. The guy that they just elected like a week ago was giving speeches about how we need to only take money from the good billionaires.
I know. I'm putting my money on David Hogg.
David Hogg. I actually know who he is. Okay, I don't think we did a good job of answering your question, Dawson, but we tried. Dante, our old friend Dante, with an excellent question. Who gets fired first, Mike Elias or Jerry Dipoto? I feel really strongly about this.
Interesting. I have no clue which way you're going to go.
Jerry Dipoto.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just think that there's more bad sentiment about Jerry Dipoto's performance. He's made the playoffs once. There's like a lot less to defend about his tenure.
Yes, exactly.
He's been like average to slightly above average or slightly below average the whole time. Elias,
roughly like 52% success rate, 54% success rate.
Wishes, bro. Elias, like, I mean, I not usually would not be wearing this hat, not to defend Mike Elias, but like he rebuilt the team.
Right. Like they actually have a collection of really good players right now.
I mean, you could make the argument that now would be the time to send his ass packing and bring in a GM who actually has the guts to fucking pay someone and compete.
Yeah.
And actually try to win.
But he has done something that a lot of other teams have struggled to do, which is draft and develop a core of good players.
He clearly can do something that only like 4 other GMs can do. He just can't do the thing that like 20 GMs could do given the opportunity. Mm-hmm. It's quite a conundrum, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and it's not like the Mariners have had no one come up who they have pinned their hopes on, but like a lot of those guys haven't panned out. What's Dustin Ackley up to these days?
I know. What's interesting about the Mariners is that I feel like Dipoto gets less credit for the Mariners' major league success stories than Elias does for the Orioles. Because the Orioles have the secret sauce when it comes to developing hitters. The Mariners have the secret sauce when it comes to developing pitchers. But the Orioles also were selecting really high in the draft, and they nailed all those picks. Like they had just had way more than they even knew what to do with in terms of. I mean, the Mariners have had like 5 really good starting pitching development success stories. That doesn't make a whole team. You know what I mean? That doesn't make like a balanced roster in the way that hitting on a bunch of really young cost-controlled hitters does. And so if I had to, I would say that Elias is probably doing a better job. Again, I'm not really convinced that Jerry Dipoto is a good GM. He's just a GM who's doing a lot of things. So I think Dipoto probably gets fired first. He's also just been the GM for longer.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he could get fired like this year.
I think
if they don't make the playoffs.
Absolutely defensible.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think people are over his shtick of trading up from the paperclip or whatever.
I agree. Speaking of Mike Elias, Danielle asked, do you have any thoughts on Mike Elias wearing an outfit with 3 collars? This is a photo. I love to describe a photo. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This is a photo that was shared on our Slack by Danielle. This is Mike Elias wearing a sport coat, a quarter zip, and a checkered button up. Honestly, my thoughts about that is just like, this is the McKinsey uniform.
Right.
Like, you guys wouldn't know what it takes to step into that forum.
It's the modern uniform, man.
I guess so. Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you. Should we get menswear guy in here?
I think menswear guy wouldn't have like that much of a problem with this. There's a fine shape and drape to the
fine shape and drape, little bit of a collar gap. I just think it's really
how can you see the collar? You're just making shit up.
No, bro.
You can't see the collar gap was what happens behind the neck. That's what he's referring to.
Right, exactly. There's some gap there, bro.
Where?
You don't see this little shadow right here?
Oh, you're talking about not his jacket. You're talking about the collar gap of his.
Yes, of the quarter zip, of like the quarter zip / shirt. I mean, I think it's the.
Do you think this is one of the 5 most unintelligible moments to listeners of the podcast?
I think so.
Where we're just describing a photo of Mike Elias.
It is the quarter zip under the sport coat that really does it. Although it looks kind of like, is this more of like a? It kind of looks like a more full-length coat. I don't even think it's like a suit coat.
Nah, it's got to be you're right, it does look kind of long. Shit. Should we get Mike Elias on the... First of all, where are they? They look just like they're in a garage.
There's like some WD-40 on the shelf behind him.
And also like a piece of PVC pipe corner. He's going to play the warehouse games with John Boy. Yeah. I'm just broadly, and I think menswear guy would probably agree, like this kind of gingham pattern is just really not it.
No, it's not it.
I don't fuck with gingham.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't hate it. It's texturally interesting. Just this overall
gingham.
Just
the whole
just
fit.
The fit in general. I do think the gingham is a bit much, but frames his face well. The lapel.
I think he's a fine looking guy. Like looks like.
That's my point. I'm trying to earnestly critique this fit.
This is kind of how I want my presidents of baseball operation dressed. If you're dressed differently than this, I'm worried. Like this is what if you are not wearing this kind of outfit, and to be clear for listeners at home, this is a gingham button-up shirt, a quarter zip sweater over top. And then
a light kind of blue,
and then a sport coat or blazer or whatever else we've got going on here. It's hard to tell from just it's like a stomach up photo that we have. Then I'm like worried that you're spending too much time thinking about your outfit. You should be thinking about what relievers to sign.
Exactly. You need to look like you just stepped out of Bain Capital.
Many of them probably did just step out of Bain Capital. I did listen to the A-Rod pod with the guy from Bain.
Did you?
Yeah.
Was it insightful?
It was one of the worst things I've ever heard. It made me so mad. It made me so mad. I can't even believe it.
I'm firing it up right after this.
It was just totally rage-inducing. All right. Speaking of McKinsey, we got a question from Sam who said, if you guys hired McKinsey, what would they tell you to do? Like, what do you think would be in that PowerPoint, bro? The first thing I thought of was betting sponsorship.
Right.
The second thing I thought of was shorter pods.
Right. Yeah. Brand synergy.
Mm.
You know, I think they'd want us to get all of our channels in order.
Yeah.
From X to Blue Sky.
Yeah. Would they want us to be on? I guess they would.
Probably.
McKinsey's kind of like woke adjacent.
Baby.
Now that woke is not in fashion, they're probably like, we don't really care about it. But
right, exactly. They know which way the wind's blowing.
If
there's one thing about
determine which way the wind is blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly. They would want us to offshore our editing.
Probably maximize our monetization as well. You know, they'd be like, you guys are not efficient enough with this.
Yeah.
You need more paywalls. You need more subscriptions.
But their big thing is like fire people. And there's only us two.
Right.
Maybe they would say that you got to go, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
They would probably be like, you could just guess what he's going to say, right?
Right. You guys have been doing this long enough. We have used DeepSeek and fed in all of the transcripts from your guys' podcast. We think we can successfully replicate
we have a new
Alex's role.
They're so wrong, though. They're so wrong. DeepSeek could never be you. Okay, we got a question from Matt. What's something you think about and understand differently that would surprise the you who started the podcast? Good question.
That's a really good question.
I can tell that you've really been contemplating it.
I really have been contemplating it. Well, frankly, I did not expect to carry this much water for
the Dodgers?
For the Dodgers and big spending teams when I started this podcast.
I think that's definitely true.
I think just in the way that we have talked about the game, I don't think that I was so anti big spending team when we started the podcast, but I don't know that I, as clearly as I do today, saw it as a moral virtue, you know?
Right. Yeah. You know, the turning point for that, frankly, was when we eventually had to like come around on the Yankees.
Right.
Because pretty early on in doing the pod, the Yankees got Giancarlo Stanton. And we were like, oh, God, the Yankees just get everybody. You know, they only got Stanton because they're the only team that's willing to pay his contract. They got him for nothing. And then in the course of like covering that, I think we even had Lindsay Adler on that episode.
Mm-hmm.
In the course of just thinking about that trade, I was like, well, why did he have to leave the Marlins?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why were they so desperate to get rid of him and Yelich and all the other players that were good on their team? And then I had a little bit, it dawned on me. I was like, well,
yeah, the
neurons
started firing in the brain.
Yeah.
You were like, wait a second. The wool got pulled up.
I think I would have been surprised at how many legal documents I've read. I would have been a little bit surprised to hear how much of a role Alex Rodriguez is playing in my life.
That's for sure.
Like, I think about him when I'm going to sleep.
Yes. You know, they just had A-Rod Summit this week.
What are you talking about?
They had their annual A-Rod Corp team summit.
You were like, they had A-Rod Summit. I'm like, who's they? Okay, so they did an A-Rod Corp Summit.
My invite got lost in the mail.
I would have been surprised that people pay for anything that we do. I honestly never thought it would get to this point where it's like, okay, we're doing a real show. With
that's true.
Bonus episodes, and people are really paying real American dollars for it. I'm still surprised sometimes. I think the final thing I would have been surprised by is like how little we talk about the games themselves.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was like, I always knew that we were not going to approach the game from like a super statistical standpoint because that market was already being serviced and is still honestly being serviced by like the same exact people, by Effectively Wild. And we were never going to do that as well or even close to as well as they do it. But I do think earlier on in the pod, I had more of a feeling like we needed to at least feign discussing whatever the biggest on-field baseball story of the week was.
Yeah.
And now I just don't feel quite as compelled to do that.
We needed that SEO, man.
That's what got us to the top.
That is what got us to the top. Where we are currently right now.
I mean, it feels nice up here. Triumph asks, if all 30 leases expired tomorrow, how many teams would be in a new city in 2026?
Really interesting question.
Yeah, it's tough.
I kind of feel like it's
fewer than
you would think,
yeah.
but it also is more than you would hope.
I think it's kind of what we were talking about earlier with free agency. If every team flooded the market all at once looking for a new city, I think fewer would move than you would think.
Yeah.
If all 30 teams' leases expired over the course of the next 10 years, maybe more of them would move than if they all expired this offseason, because there are fewer places for them to go all at once.
Right.
I think the Rays would be in a new city for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think I guess the A's would probably still be in Sacramento. They already left.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of disregarding them for the purposes of these exercises. I mean, if you keep them in Oakland, if they're still in Oakland at this point and their lease expires, then they move.
Yeah,
right. I mean,
sure. Maybe the Royals.
Yeah,
they flirted with trying to leave or like threatening to leave, but they ended up getting the deal that they wanted. So.
Right. I mean, and I know the question is which teams would be in a new city, and I don't know that the Royals necessarily fit. I think they would
Yankees
say
probably
building. Yeah, exactly.
They would move to Connecticut, and that's where they fucking belong.
Yeah, right. With the rest of their fans,
the Greenwich Yankees.
Honestly, maybe the Diamondbacks.
Yeah,
who have been.
Yeah, there's an interesting story about the Diamondbacks and the funding of their stadium.
Yeah.
Improvements that we haven't even touched yet, but
I mean, a part of me wonders if they would take that opportunity to say, we're going to get out of the desert.
You might think, but then again, what did the A's do?
Well,
yeah.
Right, but also the Diamondbacks have had years of experience and seeing that also it actually is really bad for their players.
Yeah, Marlins probably would move.
Yeah.
I think if their lease expired and they had a chance, they would probably move to I don't know, Nashville?
Yeah.
The Nashville Marlins?
Angels? Angels are the only other team that I had on my list.
I
feel like if given the opportunity, and again, like a lot of these teams are in good, large markets where it behooves the team, the league, and the city to have one or more sports teams there.
Yeah.
Like, I think that a lot of teams would say, actually, we have a good setup here. We have fans who live here. We are in a market that pays us a lot of money, which is, to be clear, every market.
Many examples of such. I think the White Sox might move. Jerry's final move would be to move the White Sox to Florida.
God, he tried.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think the Twins would move. I think the Brewers would try. I don't think they actually want to go through moving. And I think they actually like their, if not stadium, think they like their little carve out market up there.
Right.
As being like we're the Midwest team that's not Chicago.
You can move all the sand you want up there. Who's going to stop you?
They move. They moved to Southern California.
To the little plot of land.
That's so funny. No, I think that's it.
Honestly. Rays.
Yeah.
White Sox. Angels. Marlins.
Maybe Brewers. Yeah.
I think that's it. There's like 5 or 6 teams.
Yeah.
There aren't that many markets to move to.
I agree.
You're kind of in all the good ones right now.
There's 30 teams, bro. There's not that many huge cities in America. All right, final question.
All right.
This comes from Siobhanigans, who has submitted many, many good questions over the years. What are your bagel and or deli orders? So you didn't even see this one because it wasn't in Slack. It was on next to everything app.
Oh my God.
You're too busy posting from your personal account to see what's going through to the Typic Pitches account. Too busy posting 9/11 jokes on the old A_Vaisley.
Jesus. Well, listen, those weren't jokes.
Right. Those were just facts. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty simple. my 3 things that I might get. 4 bagel orders. Number 1, ham, egg, and cheese on a sesame or everything bagel. If I like the everything bagel from the place, I go everything. I prefer a good everything bagel. Lower floor on an everything bagel, though. They can fuck it up.
What kind of egg? Scrambled?
Nah, like usually omelet. Like however they prepare it, you know? Scrambled, like that's coming apart.
Yeah, but I don't mean like literally. Yeah,
like a folded over.
It's kind of like scrambled and folded.
Yes. Or if it's more of a lunchtime situation, it's going to be chicken salad, lettuce, and tomato.
Bang.
Boom. On the same kind of bagel.
Mm-hmm.
Just at the deli, you got a weird deli sandwich order.
Do I?
It's good, but it's not. They fuck it up a lot because not a lot of people order how you order. I usually just go, again, like either ham, egg, and cheese on a roll or turkey, cheddar cheese, lettuce, tomato, mayo on a roll. Boom. Keep it simple. You need to have mayo. Mayonnaise is essential in my life and in my arteries. Those are my desired sandwiches. If I'm going like a true Italian deli, then I will get like an Italian hoagie, but not just from the average deli on the corner.
Right. Bacon, egg, and cheese on everything.
The amount of times that I've accidentally eaten your bacon, egg, and cheese and you've accidentally eaten my ham, egg, and cheese is like not so many, but more than it should have been.
Yes. And every time I'm like, oh, this is really good today. And every time you're like, oh, what the fuck is this? Sometimes if I need some
bacon, it's the worst. Dude.
Sometimes if I need something a little more hearty, I'll do like a fried egg and add avocado to the sandwich.
Okay, swanky. I like it.
Yeah.
Fried egg on a sandwich is, I really have to trust the place.
It's very messy.
Yeah.
It is very hit or miss.
Yeah.
But I kind of like that sometimes. I love the ooze.
I'm always saying that.
I don't know. My deli order is.
Now you're self-conscious because I said it was a little more complicated.
I was like turkey provolone,
yum,
lettuce, tomato, pickles, mayonnaise, mustard.
Mayonnaise and mustard is the thing that screws people up, and they always forget your pickles.
Right. Actually, pickles is the thing that always does fuck people up. They just don't include pickles half the time, and I'm like, it's. Wait, so I'm curious. What is it that feels so foreign to you? Is it just that there's like
mayonnaise
so many items?
And mustard?
What is weird about that?
I
think
feels most
like a very
people would,
common sandwich.
I think most people would think like one spread. That's what I think.
Okay.
I think those are slightly competing flavors. I'm not mad at it.
Right.
It's all right. It's all right.
I think they're bringing different things to the table. The mayonnaise.
That I agree, but then the execution of it, they're really just like, if you're at the deli, they're just like slathering mayo and mustard on there.
Yeah.
If it was like a deli that I trusted or like a bespoke sandwich experience, I would trust them to proportion that correctly. But I think in practice,
like more of a
that
Subway
sandwich is right. No, I trust Jersey Mike's with my life. I'm willing to take Jersey Mike's sponsorship money. If McKinsey is listening and they can set that up for us, I'm willing to take that to monetize. But only until BlackRock ruins them. And then I will not take their money. But for now, it's still operating functionally. I have a Jersey Shore points account and everything. I'm in there.
If they forget the mustard, I'm golden. I'm good. Like, I'm so good with that. If it's just mayonnaise, that's great. I like a little extra mayonnaise anyway. If they forget the mayonnaise, I'm sending it back. I'm not touching that. Then it's just like dry.
Mayonnaise is the fucking best.
It's so good.
Thank you to the French. You know, I'm always saying that.
Yeah.
I love the French and everything they have contributed.
Yeah. I'll take a Hellman sponsorship.
Great culture. I mean, you actually were saying that you wanted to close this podcast out by giving a full-throated, wholehearted, earnest defense of the French by talking about Amelia Perez and Jacques Audiard. And I just want to give you that opportunity
right now. Like, oh yeah, this doesn't have to be longer than an hour and a half. We can do less time than that. Easy.
It's unfortunate that you've already cast your vote for Carlos Sofia Gascon.
I'm not going to engage.
You don't have to engage.
I know.
Everybody already knows what you think.
I know.
And you think that Jacques Audiard should be allowed to speak his artistic truth. What's next? Telling Martin Scorsese he can't make the movies that he wants?
Keep going. Let's talk. We can talk Grammys. You want to talk Grammys?
Nope.
I know you're pulling for a Gracie Abrams sweep.
No, I'm not. I don't think she makes good music. Sorry. Of all of the like straight down the middle pop that we could award in 2025, I don't think Gracie Abrams is the right one to do. It's just my opinion.
Right. You do think that she
Beyonce
earned her place in music.
Yeah. I love the I'm not going to dig into this actually. I'm not a big fan of JJ, to be honest. That doesn't really affect how I feel about Gracie Abrams' music, which I think is just a little too bland for me.
Right. She pulled herself up by her bootstraps to make mediocre art. You know? Exactly. She didn't ride those Nepo baby coattails. She got mediocre all on her own.
I think Beyonce will win Album of the Year. That's my prediction.
As she should.
Sure, whatever. I really don't care.
I don't either.
The whole yes, Beyonce has been snubbed for Album of the Year multiple times, but she's also won 24 Grammys.
Right.
So it's unclear to me how I'm supposed to drum up the anger to be and she should have won 27. Okay, great. I can be mad about Oscar snubs because the Oscars clearly has left out directors from ever winning anything at all. And oftentimes they win for their worst albums or worst movies in this case. But for the Grammys, I'm just kind of sure, some people should have won more, but everybody wins all the time. There's so many fucking awards and everybody makes so many albums. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no big pop star who I'm well, the Grammys has really, truly treated them wrong. Except for every rapper, which of course they're not going to be respected by the Grammys. Except for the one random rapper that the Grammys chooses to award all of the time. It's usually Kendrick Lamar or Macklemore. Right, exactly. I mean, yes, all awards bodies are broadly racist in America. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And that's why they're going to award Amelia Paris. To right those wrongs.
End it.
And you think that's great? All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. We hope we busted some myths. Maybe we just pissed you off the whole time. That's fine too. We appreciate the time. Appreciate the support. Earnestly, thank you everybody for all of your support here and on Patreon. That is patreon.com/tippingpitches. Even if you can't support on Patreon, it's quite all right with us. Just listening is all we ever ask. And maybe sending it to a friend or two that you think might enjoy Alex's vociferous defense of Jacques Audiard and his many works, which perhaps we should do that over on the Patreon feed this week.
Well, we can't because
live watch of Amelia Paris.
I was going to try to promote the actual thing we're doing on the Patreon this week, but it's fine. It doesn't even matter.
What are we doing on the Patreon this week?
We're doing a book club, bro.
Oh, so true.
Do you have that book yet?
No, but I have it on audiobook, so I've been making some progress. I don't like to use the audiobook, but when I'm on a deadline, I actually, I've already have carved out several hours of my day for listening to things, and so it's all right, I can power through it. The book is Infinite Baseball, Notes from a Philosopher at the Ballpark by Alvin Noé. We're going to talk about that on the book club this week on Patreon. After Alex is done defending Jacques Audiard. Thanks for listening. We will be back in 1 week's time.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping Pitches.
Tipping Pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping Pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!